You're watching Open Agenda. Here's our host, Joe White.
Welcome to Open Agenda. I'm your host, Joe White. In the studio with us is Mike Goldberg from Del Mar. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Jim Atkins from Ardella. So Governor Westmore just had a State of the State address, and we don't normally cover state politics here on this show. However, a lot of what he said, a lot of the talking points will eventually end up on our doorstep here in Wicomico County as we go through the budget process, which, just so everyone knows, the fiscal 27 budget is due. It starts July 1st. It's due by the third week of June, but it's going to be rolled out by the county executive in April. You would think that now that we have the audit back from fiscal year 25, that, these budget processes are going on now. We're going to hear about it here in about another 2 months. There's going to be some questions raised, and we still have 60 days of the General Assembly session. Yeah. So we got a long ways to go. What I'd like to do is bring in Dr. Joe Venosa, and I want to break down the State of the State address with Mike and Joe. And then, Jim, I'd like to bring you back in because as many meetings as you attend, there's going to be questions that come up, and I want the folks out there to start thinking about what concerns they should have so they can get addressed. I mean, these can be solved, but we need to get it out there. So stay with us. When we come back, we're going to have Dr. Joe Venosa in. We're going to talk about the State of the State address. Welcome back to Open Agenda. In the studio with us now, it's Mike Goldberg from Del Mar. Thanks for sticking around.
Of course.
Dr. Joe Venosa from Salisbury, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So we've talked in many episodes in the past about what the anticipation residents here in Wicomico County can expect as we get into budget season. We're not far from it. We're about 2 months away. But specifically, we saw the Governor Westmore's State of the State address. And I know that we all feel like there's a lot of impact that's going to come down from the state in the last 60 days of the session. Mm-hmm. And I want to talk about a couple key points he brought up in his State of the State address. Mm-hmm. First, he let it off that he's not looking to raise taxes or fees. Mm-hmm. And we still do have a structural deficit.
We are going to prove that we can do more with less. So once again, I've introduced a balanced budget with a general fund that is smaller than the previous year. And in a moment when prices are going up on everything, our proposed budget does not raise taxes or fees on the people of this state.
How do you feel like we're going to bridge that deficit?
He may not be raising taxes and fees again, this particular year, but they're already very high. And if you're going to not raise taxes and fees, which I do not advocate for raising anything, and you are expanding spending on a wide variety of entitlements, then there's going to be other items that are going to have to be reduced.
Okay.
And one of my biggest concerns is that the funds that will flow from the state to Wicomico County are undoubtedly going to be reduced. I think we can expect a diminished disparity grant and other grants that we don't know what they'll be. It could be education, it could be parks, it could be anything, but they're going to have to stop spending so much.
Well, Joe, we've seen that the state has come out and said that they don't expect to slash our disparity grant for this year.
That was our big fear as of right now. That is what they said. But keep in mind, the state, and in particular the governor's office and their budget proposal, that's just the starting point. There is 2 other branches of the state government that are going to have their say as to what gets cut, raised, what have you. So I expect those numbers to change. But it is reassuring, at least, that at this point, they are trying to reassure the counties that those disparity grants are probably not going to be touched. But again, we don't know the final number.
I don't feel reassured personally at all.
Well, let's say Mike is correct and that there's an adjustment to our disparity grant or just state funding for teacher pensions because they slashed years ago half of that and they could be coming after more or the rest of it. How would the county approach that in their budget process? Because that's supposed to come out in April.
Yeah, well, the county is good. Well, and again, I think this is something that other council members have talked about before, and obviously we've addressed it many times on the show, is the fact that just structurally in Maryland, the counties have increasingly had to dip into their own reserves and their own funding apparatus to pay for things that are mandated by the state. We could call them unfunded mandates to some extent or new obligations, but that is something that is not going away and is going to increase. And part of that challenge is that so much of the budget, I believe 84% of the Maryland state budget is mandatory spending. So there's actually very little.
There's not a lot of wiggle room.
There's not a lot of wiggle room. Yeah. And you know, what we also don't realize is the cuts that do come to the county via our increased obligation elsewhere are also coming with state cuts that do affect local things. For example, you know, one of the big things that I've always been an advocate for is disability services. The governor for the last 2 years has proposed pretty drastic cuts in disability funding models for at-home care workers. So, for example, if you have a relative or a child or someone who has a severe disability and you are their primary caretaker, there's a funding apparatus to help you.
Yes.
Well, those funds are in jeopardy now. In fact, the governor's budget has proposed, I think, a $150 million cut. So we're already facing cuts that affect people locally.
Mike, you and I watched the State of State presentation, and one of the things that Governor Moore blamed was the federal government cutting 25,000 federal jobs of folks who live in the state of Maryland.
Because just in the past year, the federal government has fired around 25,000 Marylanders who have federal jobs in our state alone. Our neighbors, our friends, our family. It's the biggest federal job cut of any state in the country, where the president's domestic policy agenda could kick up to 180,000 Marylanders off of health care. More than 680,000 Marylanders could see their food assistance taken away.
Maryland obviously is being disproportionately affected by the DOGE cuts. I, for one, support the DOGE cuts. Maryland, for decades, has been dependent on revenues that are generated by our proximity to the seat of the federal government. A lot of the federal contractors and there's ancillary or collateral industries that are completely dependent on the revenue generator that is the federal government. And they have relied on that, and meanwhile, with regard to the private sector, they've imposed very stringent and expensive regulations and high taxes. So Maryland has not been a good place to bring a business, to start a business, or to operate a business.
Yeah, I would echo that. I mean, as a business operator, if location was, you could locate anywhere, the state of Maryland right now would not be the epicenter of where you would want to go. Maybe a particular spot, whether you're agriculture or shipping or
Sure.
one of those types of, where location really does matter. But the state itself, all cards on the table, isn't it?
By and large, there's a fundamental rule of economics, and that's that capital flows to where it can make the highest return on investment. And I'm sorry, when you have high taxes, high expensive regulations, that's not where you're going to make your best return on investment. You're going to bring that business someplace where your operating costs and taxes are going to be cheaper so that you can maximize profits for your investors.
Well, I think there's two ways to look at it, because I think both things are true. I think, for example, Maryland has, and again, for my own view, I'm totally against the DOGE cuts because we already have a really low percentage of federal workers relative to our population. We have less workers now in 2026 than we did in 1970, even though we have more than basically 100 million people. So we're doing more with less anyway. But to your point, Maryland compared to, let's say, Virginia, right, which also relies a lot on a federal workforce and on those ancillary businesses, they've been in a better position than us because even though they too have been decimated by federal cuts, they have more of a backstop, which is a bigger business base to withstand those cuts and to theoretically bring in other businesses. So if you just compare Maryland and Virginia by the metric of federal action, you can see two things. Federal action has been detrimental to Maryland, but to your point, when you don't have an attractive business climate, whether it's the fees, whether it's the broader costs of just opening a business and operating it, it does put us at a competitive disadvantage. And we've never really figured out, up until now, a way to really change the tide. to kind of get out of our structural deficit that is now. I think we all would agree it's a feature. It's not a bug. Every year we come to this point of we're $1 billion over.
Well, 1.5.
1.5
Yeah.
or what have you,
Yeah.
right? I mean, so until that's addressed, the federal government drama is always going to be there, and it's probably going to get worse before it gets any better.
Okay, here's something that is self-made.
Yeah.
I mean, the rising cost of energy here in the state.
Sure, yeah.
I thought it was a little bit disingenuous that Governor Moore said, well, our energy bills have gone up the same as they've gone across the country.
Since this time last year, energy prices are now up 13%. The price of beef is up 19%. The price of fertilizer is up 15%. And I just want to be clear, that's not in Maryland. That's nationwide. Those are the numbers across the country.
Maryland has surged ahead in the increase in spending.
Look, I can only look at my own electric bills. In 1 year, it's been quite a substantial jump. And look, I talked to people in other parts of the country. Their costs are going up, but nowhere compared to what we've experienced in Maryland.
But the effect here in Wicomico County is how many hundreds of thousands of square feet do we have to supply energy to Board of Education buildings, government office buildings, state civic center.
Yeah.
So there's going to be that component in those departments' budgets.
Oh, yeah.
So even if they see an increase in their budget,
that increase may just get you enough to pay the electric bill.
Yes. I've seen that in the private industry, and let's just go to what Mike was saying earlier. The state has gotten us in a position where it's hard to be competitive even for ourselves. And that's not counting the increase in payroll tax. I mean, one of the things the state of Maryland instituted, it came out last July 1st. It doesn't actually start until this July 1st, but we've all been paying it for the last 6+ months, is an extra 0.4% of payroll tax that's paid by the employee and 0.4% of payroll tax paid by the employer. For the sick leave. And this is different than just the 5 days that folks earned with the it's still in place, that sick leave policy as well. But this is going to work like unemployment, where people can apply for up to 12 weeks a year of sick leave. But it's also costing employers. One of the employers is Board of Education. We're going to have to account for that because you're going to have an increase.
Well, it's not only is it costing the employers, but that also means that there's less money in the pool to give employees raises or other benefits. Money is a limited resource. And, the way we're spending it in Maryland, where most of it is going to some type of entitlement, let people take care of themselves, cut their taxes, let them make decisions with their own, about how they handle their own money rather than having government make those decisions for us. This is the age-old battle between, conservative and liberal. I understand, but as a conservative, I want government out of my life.
Well, one of the other topics he brought up was public safety, and he used it in the vein of ICE and outlawing 287G agreements.
I want to thank you all for introducing legislation to protect Marylanders from the unconstitutional actions of some federal agents this session. Working together, I am confident that we can take meaningful steps to hold federal agents accountable for violating the Constitution and help those who have been harmed to make sure they also get their justice. The people of this state have come to learn that I have no patience nor tolerance for violent offenders. And our extraordinary men and women in Maryland law enforcement will continue to work with federal officials when it comes to getting violent criminals off of our streets.
So this is something that's going to come up with the county. We probably are, according to county executive, probably going to join a class action lawsuit within the state.
So much for conservative spending.
Well, I mean, the understanding right now is the lawyers on the side that would fight it would be pro bono. Now, of course, if they lose, then there's the chance that we would be responsible for the state's portion of their defense. Whether you agree with ICE, whether you agree with 287G agreements, do you think Governor Moore has an understanding of what these laws are going to do and how that's going to trickle down into a county like Wicomico County?
Well, again, there's so many not hypotheticals, but there are so many variables that are at play here, because there's a real debate right now. That some are saying, if we get rid of 287G, it's going to lead to a surge of ICE activity that will
We've been told that.
occur.
Yeah.
But the reality is, nothing is going to prevent ICE enforcement from happening, especially with the massive amount of money you talk about spending. The $30 billion that's being pumped into these federal agencies, that is going to require them to basically be in many places, regardless of what the counties do. So I don't actually think there's much of a correlation between what federal immigration policy and the actual activities that you're seeing in some places and what the counties are doing. I think it is debatable. Look, I don't think anybody is against getting somebody who is an undocumented individual who has a criminal record off the street. But I do think, from my perspective, the thing that I do have concerns with is that it opens the door to a lack of due process, because you could just be put in the county jail and then you're not even adjudicated, right? That's
But again, we don't know. We talked about we don't know what the fiscal ramifications of having more people in our detention center will be.
We don't know that, and again, this goes back to the fact that the budget's not even finalized yet.
Sure.
And so part of that policy, I think we talk about the 287G issue as a political, moral issue, which it is on many levels, but it is a fiscal issue too, especially when you factor in liability. And now when you're throwing in lawsuits, it adds all kinds of numbers that we don't really know yet.
Do you feel like there's a sense out of Annapolis of what we're facing here in our own county? And do you think our own county is prepared to face what the state is possibly rolling towards us?
I don't think the county is prepared. I really don't. I don't think the General Assembly in Annapolis is prepared. I don't think they fully understand the consequences of their policies. $2 billion deficits, I think, going forward every single year, into the foreseeable future. Only thing you can do is raise taxes or cut spending, but they're not. They're far more likely to raise taxes than they are to cut spending.
I think the shore, just by virtue of the population, is always going to be put on the back burner. It's not even a political issue, because even Democrats from the shore will tell you that. We're at a disadvantage of population and wealth. We're not in the metropolitan core. That's just the nature of.
We don't have enough votes here on the Eastern Shore to really
or financial
influence.
or financial influence, and which is often correlated. So that's just that's an issue that we've always faced, and it will get worse. But the thing that I think people aren't fully taking into account, and this is a conversation that applies to both our county executive and the governor, frankly, and all executives in the state. So many people are running right now for that second term. And the wheels tend to come off at the start of the second term. And it's getting through the end of the first term where the setup is.
That's a good point.
Well, and look, this is why the governor is never going to say that we're going to raise taxes the year before the election.
Yeah.
It's the same reason why, I'm probably, as a state worker, hopefully might get a 1 or 2% COLA. We joke that we actually call it the election year COLA. Here's your pennies now, because it may not come the year after.
Okay.
And so there's a lot of posturing just because it is election season. So the promises, whether it's the executive is making in her budget or the governor.
Promises from a politician, especially one who's been in office for more than one term.
Yeah.
Those promises and $2 will buy you a cup of coffee.
Well, there's an old expression, right? That it's a fact that nearly every first-term politician spends about 1,500 days thinking about a second term.
Okay. Well, thank you both for your insight. What I want to do is I want to bring in Jim Atkins, because really, at the end of the day, for Wicomico County, we need to have our citizens ask good questions as we go through this next budget process. Understanding the state challenges, but also understanding that it is an election year here in Wicomico County as well.
Sure, yeah.
So, Mike, will you stick around?
Sure.
All right, so stay with us. When we come back, we're going to bring in Jim Atkins. We're going to ask him what questions we can expect to be raised during budget season. Welcome back to Open Agenda. Back in the studio with us is Mr. Jim Atkins from Mardella. Thank you. Mike Goldberg from Del Mar. Thanks for sticking around.
Yes, sir.
So we had a chance to talk to Dr. Jovanosa about the governor's State of the State address. And, ultimately we're concerned how this is going to affect Wicomico County. And Jim, you have been attending almost every county council meeting now for several years. You've seen this budget process in non-election years. And we're going to have, there's going to have to be some debate. There's going to be some give and take. We've already seen the capital improvement plan come out, and it's got some pretty extraordinary numbers in it as well. How do you think this is going to roll out, and what questions will you be ready to ask?
Well, I think the biggest thing that I want to know is, can we separate what the county has to have, the necessities, from the wish list?
Okay.
And, we've talked about it before. One of the biggest things that it's not in the CIP because it doesn't need to be are these EMS chase units.
Okay.
And, that's probably a $5 million, $6 million item that we're looking at getting. And that has to be addressed. That's a necessity.
Okay.
The school security systems are necessities.
Well, and there's a capital component to that and an operating.
And an operating, and it's going to go away. We've got the collective bargaining for the FOP going on right now that we don't have a clue what that's going to cost. So we've got a plan for the expenses that we know are coming that we're going to have to pay. And if there's money left over in the county after that, then there are some projects that we can address. But those projects should not be on the top burner.
Well, and I think we all would support making sure our sheriff's deputies are well funded, well paid.
Right.
These FOP negotiations, we saw this 2 years ago. They actually got completed late.
They got completed late.
Which would be in May. And by May, we're only 30 days away from the budget needed to be ratified, right?
30 days.
Mike, talking about accounting for numbers, I was actually just at the Del Mar Town Council meeting this past week, and Del Mar High School is actually putting in the weapons detection system in their high school because that's part of their independent school district. Mm-hmm. Ironically, the elementary school is in the Wicomico County School District. When you hear things like $1.6 to $2 million for weapons detection systems on the capital side, possibly $4 to $4.5 million on the operating side to pay for the additional staff to run these machines to get the kids in and out of school. When you also watch Westmore's State of the State and you know that we're going to have some unfunded mandates, where will you start to prioritize, or how should someone that doesn't go to every county council meeting prioritize some of these projects?
In my opinion, public safety is the number one imperative of government. So, I certainly advocate for the weapons detection systems. It's a shame that we have to have that. When I was a kid, you didn't have to worry about such things. Yes, we have to spend the money on this, and it's doggone it, it's a waste of money ultimately, because only to the extent that we have to deal with so many bad people today that we didn't used to have to deal with. It's unfortunate. Public safety, job number one of the government. For the federal government, it's protecting our shores, and for the county government, it's protecting our schools and the general population from crime.
Jim, in the last segment, we talked about energy bills, and that's going to affect every department.
Yes.
Even the government office building itself. I mean, there's no way that's costing the same amount to heat and air condition as it did 2 years ago.
No, that's increasing, and they're talking about these AI buildings that they're going to need and how much energy they consume, and there's a problem somewhere. I mean, we want to talk about, the state wants to talk about 5% of the farmland needs to be converted to solar energy. No, I'm sorry. If you want to put a regulation in there, put a regulation in that every industrial building has to have solar power on its roof to power that building, or at least partially building. Put solar, just like you got it at Warwick. Put it in the parking lots. Cover up the parking lots. Don't cover up the farmland
I
in this
like-
county.
I will say I like that better than covering farmland, but if you do regulate that any new commercial buildings have to have solar, you're increasing the amount of money it's going to cost to bring business in. And that may prohibit, especially with a county that the cost of living here is lower than it is in Baltimore.
I don't believe that the alternative energy generating schemes are really viable at this point. I don't think the technologies are there. Every solar panel that goes up, whether it's on a business or on a home, is already subsidized by the federal government. It costs more to generate electricity through solar or wind than it does through more traditional forms of energy generation. One of the problems we have here in Maryland is that our domestic energy production by traditional means has been reduced. We're relying on energy that's actually generated outside the state.
Most of New Jersey and Pennsylvania.
Yes. And we need to be looking, especially with the advent of artificial intelligence and the enormous energy demand that's going to create. And we do need to move forward with that, or we're going to be behind the eight ball.
Exactly.
So we have to look at viable alternatives. And locally here, we've been dealing with the offshore wind. It costs 4 or 5 times more money to generate electricity through offshore wind turbines than it does through a gas or coal or oil power generating station.
But how many years have we been talking about this? And yes, it's not the best solution, solar and wind. But every time you start working on something, the next administration does away with it. So then you're back at ground zero. We've got to do something. And we can't, you talk about kicking a can down the road. That's all this is. We're just kicking a can down the road. And when you sit here and look at Wicomico County, and people look at their electric bills, there's something going on when you have a person with Delmarva Power paying the amount of money that they're paying for monthly electric versus a person who is with Chop Tank Co-op.
I can say I'm on co-op.
I am too.
My bills have gone up minimally.
Yes, and when I look at when these people on Delmarva tell me what their electric bills are, I just shake my head and wonder what is going on there.
A year ago, the county council was supposed to have a work session with Delmarva Power, and it got canceled by Delmarva Power at the last minute. I'm disappointed to see that it hasn't been rescheduled, and I'd like to see that be a priority. Not because the county council is going to be able to somehow regulate Delmarva Power, but force Delmarva Power to be much more transparent with our elected officials and the public here about exactly how they're coming up with the rates.
Well, it's another example of, as time has gone on, Delmarva Power, for us older people, DP&L, was a local company.
Yeah, they were paying stock.
It took care of its local people. It has been bought, swallowed till now as a company that doesn't care about Wicomico County or the Eastern Shore at all. All they care about is their bottom line and the money going to the stockholders.
And there's less competition.
Yes.
When you have these utilities, you got one electric line. You're not going to have 10 different companies offering service over it. But
and that's where a lot of the increases come from, the distribution charges, the transmission charges,
right.
Not the generation charges.
Right.
So, and in Maryland we have deregulation on generation charges. You can go out and find your own supplier, but the distribution, how it gets to your house,
that's where you get hammered.
And that is a regulated part of the utility still. And I don't believe. I watched Governor Moore's State of the State. I just don't believe they are doing their jobs to make sure that our interests are protected. So then Wicomico County is forced to come and do it for themselves.
I don't think we can look to government for innovation with respect to cheaper energy. This is something that needs to be left to the private sector.
Industry.
Take a look at the oil industry. Where was the government involved in developing the oil industry? At the turn of the century, there was a couple of oil companies in Texas, and now there's a gas station, a private sector gas station on every corner. These are not government operations. Let's unleash the power of the private sector to solve these problems and get government the heck out of it, because government can't do it.
Well, one thing we know for sure is we'll be there, we'll be watching and asking questions,
Yep.
and we definitely encourage everyone else to do the same. So thanks for watching this episode of Open Agenda. We'll be back later this week with another new episode.